This changes everything for the Bills. With the end of minicamp, the team and the fans have a clear idea of who is staying and who will be getting cut. In the few weeks before training camp starts, reports have come out predicting which players will make that 53-man roster in August, and there's a lot of competition between young and veteran players. My name is Maeve Miller, and I'm a part of the Bills Digest team, so please subscribe to our Bills Digest YouTube channel. So obviously I want to talk about the offense and just what is kind of happening with that. I saw this on Twitter. I thought that was kind of funny. Breaking news, former Wyoming QB Josh Allen has made the cut, which, shocker. But I just think it is exciting that we have a QB that we can count on, that's locked in for however many years. And it's just nice not to have to worry about that because we certainly had to in the past. And a lot of other teams, that's a big problem for them. So yeah, Allen locked in. And the other two quarterbacks that this was from Buffalo News, they suspect that it'll be Mike White instead of Mitch Trubisky, who they think is getting cut. And this is largely due to cap space. In this analysis, it said because of that, the potential cap savings that come with cutting Trubisky, $2.5 million, is too great to ignore. Trubisky might be the safer option as a team's number 2 quarterback, but White has a higher ceiling. Mike White is definitely under the radar. He's played in a couple different teams. He's been in the league for 6 years and was on the Cowboys for a few years, then the Jets and the Dolphins last year. And obviously, we hope that White doesn't have to play at all and that Allen stays healthy. So this isn't a huge deal, but it's definitely something that's interesting. And then there's also the wide receiver battle. We have Khalil Shakir, who is locked in with that contract extension, and he's clearly wide receiver 1. And then as we kind of move down the line, I would say Keon Coleman's probably the number 2 spot, but the wide receiver 3rd spot is definitely a little more up in the air. We have Joshua Palmer and Elijah Moore, who we received during the free agency, and they actually went to high school together, which is kind of funny. Both, they're not the flashiest star players on the team, but they definitely put up good numbers and are very consistent. So I'm excited to see what those two can do, especially battling for that 3rd spot, or maybe even the 2nd, 4th, whatever it could be. We're not sure yet. And then Curtis Samuel is coming in at the 5th spot, and he's been on the Bills. So he's got a little more experience with Josh Allen and with the offense, but it's anyone's game for now. And then notable cut that I thought is Christian Wilkerson, because I've talked about him a little bit, and he is a little bit of an older player and never was a super standout player, but I think he would be a good solid insurance if someone gets hurt. So I was surprised that they cut him, but seeing that Tyrell Shavers and Chenault Jr. on the practice squad, that does make sense to me. So they do have a lot of wide receivers at this point, and they like to keep a lot. So I'm curious to see what happens with that. But I feel like this was a pretty strong projection. But obviously curious to see what you guys think, if there's any changes to the cuts or practice squads or for the starters. And then the running backs was pretty simple. The top 3, James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, those 3 are locked in. I love that trio. I think even Davis and Johnson are great backups for him, and it can also play at the wide receiver spot and just be very flexible. So running backs give you no stress, so that's what I'm excited about. The offensive line is also very strong. Their starters, Deion Dawkins, Connor McGovern, Dave Edwards, Osiris Torrance, and Spencer Brown, when they play the 5-man O-line. And so I think the competition will be more for the backup spots. So the offensive line played so well. I feel like last year they helped protect the quarterback, establish that run game better. So I feel like the offense as a whole, there's not a lot of changes that are happening, except I'd say maybe the wide receivers. But for the most part, I feel like they just have a very strong, and it's the defense that was more worked on and needed more work, clearly. So yeah, offense, wide receiver, running back, offensive line, quarterback, I'm very confident in. I'm very excited to see what they can do. I think the starters will play well, but if other guys that were recently drafted or picked up end up playing better, then that's even more exciting. So yeah, next that leads me into the defensive breakdown, which there's definitely a little bit more that goes into this. So this was a quote that I saw in just an ESPN piece, and it just said Buffalo spent most of offseason trying to improve a defense that finished 28th in the PFF grade last season. The Bills used free agency to bolster the defensive line with Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi, and Joey Bosa, further complementing the set of players up front are recent draft picks TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, and Deion Walker. So obviously the Bills did use a lot of these draft picks on defensive players. It was kind of interesting. They really didn't choose any offensive players, and we can see Hairston they used in the first round, rookie cornerback, TJ Sanders, Landon Johnson, Deion Walker, like they said, Jordan Hancock, Jackson Hawes, who will be tight end, Dorian Strong, cornerback. So I just think it was interesting that the Beane, the general manager, had a clear plan going into the offseason, and I think he executed it very well. Buffalo was stated to have one of the best offseason moves, so I think that's very exciting. But getting into more specifics, the linebackers, there's been a lot kind of going on with that, but the starters that are projected are Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, and then we have Joe Andreessen, Buffalo Joe, who we love, Dorian Williams and Shaq Thompson. Dorian Williams and Joe Andreessen are both like newer players, so it'd be interesting what happens with them. Joe is obviously like a fan favorite. Williams isn't as known, and Shaq Thompson they actually just brought in. I made a video about this a couple weeks ago, but people were really excited about the prospect of him kind of being more of a veteran player and being able to show maybe the other guys the ropes, and also saying that he might cause Balin Spector to be cut, and that's what this report said as well, which I wouldn't be surprised about or mad about, because I feel like he was kind of a liability when he was on the field. It just didn't look like he was as confident or knew what he was doing, and he also had injuries that caused him to miss a lot of mini camp, so I feel like that's also a very strong reason why he might not be on the 53-man roster. Next, I want to talk about the edge rushers. Obviously, Greg Rousseau is one of my favorite players. He deserves that first spot. He's great. But we move down the line, it gets a little more interesting. Joey Bosa, sadly, is hurt. And this was like very concerning because that's what people had warned like the Bills about, and fans were very worried when we were going to pick him up for this 1-year contract, that he's such a good player, but his issue is staying healthy. And what did he do? He hurt his calf and has missed mini camp, but he's really confident that he will make training camp. It's obviously not a strong start, but if he can make it to training camp and stay healthy, I'm really excited to see what he can do. AJ Epenesa is also one of my favorite players, probably because he went to the University of Iowa, which is where I go. And I just think he's a great player. I think he's like really gritty and he uses that strength. But people are saying that he might be traded in the next year, so curious about that. Landon Jackson, he's a rookie, so that should be interesting to see what he does. But yeah, I'm excited about what the edge rushers can do. There's been a lot of moves, getting rid of like Von Miller. So there's some big shoes to fill with that, but I think that these edge rushers can do a really good job. We also have the cornerbacks, Christian Benford, who had a huge contract extension and I think is one of the best Bills defensive players. He made it through the ranks. He was drafted in way later rounds and ended up beating out one of the Bills' first-round picks for that starting cornerback spot. And then once you get to the second cornerback spot, it's a little iffy. People are saying that it could be between Tre'Davious White, who is just such a good Buffalo guy. He was on the Bills, then got traded, now is back. And he's definitely a little older, and he's been through a lot of injuries, but he's such a good person and was such a good player in his prime that maybe he'll be able to bring that back and beat out his potential competition for that second spot, which people are thinking will be Maxwell Harrison, who was the Bills' first-round pick. And it'll be interesting, a rookie against like a veteran who's definitely aged out of his prime. I'll be curious to see who wins that out. But we also have Dorian Strong up there, Dane Jackson, who the Bills also brought back. That he's projected to be more of a practice squad player, but I feel like Jackson was more reliable than some of these other players, so that'll be interesting to see what happens. And with Rasul Douglas gone, I feel like, yeah, that competition will be very strong between most likely White and Hairston. And I feel like Rasul Douglas is leaving kind of a gap. He wasn't better than Benford, but I feel like he was a very strong player, so we'll see what happens with that. But I kind of checked on Twitter, and it said, this was in response to a video about the Bills' mini camp and just some of the strides they've been making. And it says, the potential of a new and revamped defense elevates this team to a whole new level, which I feel like is so true because they're already playing at such a high level with the offense, just being so good. And the defense really needed to work up to kind of that level. I don't think they'll ever beat out the offense for how good they are, but you can't have a great offense and then a bad defense. I'm not saying the defense is bad, but it just definitely could use some work. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty excited to see what happens. Another tweet I saw was the Bills should be in for their most competitive training camp in years. Not only does Buffalo appear to have a roster that can contend, but there's enough depth for a bunch of roster battles. So I feel like that's very exciting. I feel like some of these roles where there might be battles is in like cornerback, which I mentioned, wide receiver for those later spots, and definitely the safety spot. There's been a lot going on. We have some younger players versus some veteran players that they brought in, so I'm definitely curious, but McDermott has stated that it doesn't matter what round you were drafted in, or if you're a veteran or a young guy, whoever plays the best will get that spot. Anyone has a chance, and I just love that mentality because it's not like the first round draft pick is automatically getting that starting spot. No, there's a lot of competition in the Bills. I feel like they tend to keep more guys now, and then they beat them out. So that'll be interesting. And training camp starts in July, so we got a couple weeks till then, and then the official roster doesn't come out till August. And I think in those coming weeks and months, it'll become clearer for like some of the defensive battles between like the other players, who will emerge on that 53 spot roster and who could potentially be a starter. But yeah, for now, we'll watch and see and hope that all these players are getting stronger and better in that offseason. Thank you for watching. And once again, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and go Bills.